Great. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you with us this afternoon. This is the Adult Diploma Working Group meeting for fall of 2022. I will turn my camera on for a second. I am Jody, and we'll be hearing from a number of different people today, but I will be facilitating our conversation today. So welcome, everyone. Really great to have you. And thanks for being here. And yeah, go ahead and continue introducing yourself in the chat. If you're just joining us, we were just sharing if you have plans for MEA break this week, what your plans are. All right. So this afternoon, this is our agenda. This is our plan for the next couple of hours together. We'll start with some introductions like we usually do. I have several sort of announcements and updates and reminders to share with you all. We're going to have some updates about SID and how the portfolio works in SID, how the submission process works in SID. I'll give you an update on kind of the review process and the timeline and what that's looking like right now. Then we're going to spend a chunk of time talking about high school credits and analyzing high school transcripts. That piece of content is the piece of content that we were planning to do earlier in October when we had a training on high quality evidence and we ran out of time. So we will sort of continue that training and learn about that piece together today. And then the last thing we have to do today is to really take a dive into the HiSET and how we are going to add the HiSET to completion options for the standard adult diploma. So that's the plan for today. I do want to let you know that we are planning to have breakout discussions today, specifically around the HiSET and adding that into adult diploma. So this is your heads up to, comb your hair if you need to. It will be towards the end of our meeting time today. And we do ask that if you can, if you're in a space that allows it, that you would be ready to turn on your camera as you participate in groups. So just a heads up, that's coming later on in our meeting today. So I want to start with just introductions. For those of you who have been around a while, you know most of the folks involved, but there are a lot of us involved in the leadership of this adult diploma project. So I just want to kind of introduce and give the floor for a second to some of us who are in the room. So from the Department of Education, there are several of us here today, and several of us that work in some way or other with the Adult Diploma Project. So I'm Jody. I am the program quality specialist on the team, and I've kind of been the point person for adult diploma stuff for a couple of years now. And I will hand it off to Brad.
Thanks, Jody. Good to see everyone today. Brad Haskamp with the Minnesota Department of Education. I'm the State Adult Education Director, and I'll turn it over to Brandy.
Hi there, I'm Brandy Logan, and I am the High School Equivalency and Accountability Specialist with the Department of Education team. Nice to meet everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Astrid.
Thanks, Brandy. Hi, everybody. I am Astrid Leiden, and I am the Professional Development Specialist on our team. Good to see you.
All right, thank you. So those folks are all on the MDE team, but we have a lot of other folks who are involved in leadership with the adult diploma. And I wanted to highlight this group of people. We have a couple of content specialists from the Atlas team who provide support, Christine and Lindsay, and we also have support through LAN, support for holding these webinars and also for the review. I believe Lindsay is in the room here. I'm not sure if Christine is on or not, but I would like to invite Lindsay and or Christine and Wendy to turn on your camera and just say hello to the group really quick.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry if you also hear background noise. But hello, I am Lindsay Boost and I work with Atlas as the math or numeracy coordinator. And I am getting to dive into adult diploma this year, and I'm excited about what I'm learning so far, and I'm excited to learn from all of you. So thanks for having me.
Wendy, we see you, but we don't hear you because you are muted.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. I am with Literacy Action Network as the admin coordinator.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay, I recognize I put you a little bit on the spot there, so thanks for being willing to jump on without prior notice. So thank you, Wendy, for introducing yourself. Wendy is a really important person in making our the portfolio review process go smoothly. And then the other person that I listed here on this slide is Jenny, and Jenny you will hear from in a little bit. Jenny offers, I think probably many of you know Jenny. She works on the team that supports SID. And then, oops, let's see, there we go. So the other really important part of the leadership team for adult diploma is the review team. So these are the folks who are practitioners out in the field, either current or former practitioners, teachers, managers, folks involved with adult diploma. And this group of people is an essential part of how we manage to review all of the portfolios and all of the evidence that is submitted. So whenever you submit something for review, at least two of these folks have their eyes on it, and they are making, they're looking at it thoroughly, they are giving feedback, and they're making recommendations to our team here at MDE, and ultimately our team here at MDE makes the call about whether things pass or don't pass. I'm not sure who we have from the review team on with us right now, but if any of you would like to turn on your camera and wave to the group and introduce yourself, you are welcome to do that. Or if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, yes, hi Andy. Andy's on mute. That's awesome. Nice. We all need one of those, Andy. Very nice. Yep. Thanks for being here, Andy. Great. I take every opportunity I can to say how grateful I am for these folks. They really do make the process of thorough review for portfolios and for evidence possible. Without them, it just really wouldn't be possible to do the deep dive review that we do. So grateful to you all. So, and then I just want to acknowledge and sort of explain and make sure we're all on the same page about who the adult diploma working group is, because really that's you, that's us, that's all of us who are here on the call today, plus many other people. So anyone who's involved in standard adult diploma is invited and welcome to attend these working group meetings. So that can be teachers, managers, but it can also be support staff, counselors, advisors, and we know many of you out there play multiple of those roles. So any and all of you are obviously welcome to participate in this group. And just also want to reiterate that our expectation is that each standard adult diploma program would have at least one representative, one staff person who is attending these quarterly working group meetings. So this group of people really is meant to be a sort of working group, a collaborative community of practice of folks who are all doing this work, folks who can share ideas and give input and really kind of move all of the work forward. So grateful for all of you as well for being on the call today. And then I just want to recognize that in the past, so it used to be that these adult diploma working group meetings happened in person. We used to meet 4 times a year, all day in person. I know some of you remember those days, and some of you have come on board since then. When we used to meet in person, we always had a chunk of time where we could sort of separate out into different groups based on content or based on role. It's been trickier to orchestrate that in the last couple of years when we have done most of our, or all of our convenings online. But we are hopeful sort of over the course of this current program year that we will be able to establish those groups again. So thinking about how to sort of convene folks who are specifically ELA teachers, or other folks who are math teachers, and maybe also groups of folks by role, like administrators. There might be some folks who specifically want to talk about high school equivalency. So we will, in the upcoming meetings for the rest of this year, be thinking a little bit more about how to connect you with other folks who are sort of have some of the same roles and thoughts and questions so that you can work on those things together. All right, so that's a quick overview of who all is involved in this working group and who's kind of present in the room today. Next, I just want to run through some announcements, some updates, some reminders, just stuff to remember, stuff to know about Adult Diploma. This is our second quarterly meeting for this year. So that means we have 2 more quarterly meetings left in the current program year. The next one will be, when the weather looks like this. So we have one, that meeting will be in January, and that will be a webinar like this one. Then, fingers crossed, we are hopeful to meet again in April in person for the first time. At that point, it will be the first time in more than 3 years. So there are not registration links that have been publicly posted for either of those events yet, but I just encourage you at this point to put invites for yourself on your calendar for those events so that you're sure that you have them. And we will send out registration information, with plenty of time before each of those events. So then just another reminder, important thing for you to know and remember is that we are currently housing all of the most important adult diploma documents on the Atlas website. So hopefully you are getting used to going there when you are looking for resources and materials around adult diploma. So just want to give a quick screenshot here of where to find things on the Atlas website. So at atlasabe.org in the resource libraries, you'll find this icon. This resource library is specifically for high school equivalency, including adult diploma. The one important thing to note about that website is that we do have some of the adult diploma resources behind password protection. And the reason we do that, it's not that anything is top secret or anything, but we do require an application and a training process for programs to offer the adult diploma. So we want to control a little bit who has access to those materials rather than just posting them in a completely public way. The trick is the password, the password protection can be a little bit easy to miss. So if you click into the resource library and you click into the adult diploma resources and you feel like, oh, it's just a blank screen, look up here towards the left-hand part of your screen and you may see this password box. You'll need to enter the password, which is MN Diploma, and then you'll be able to see those resources. So just a heads up about that. I know there's been a little bit of confusion about that, but hopefully everybody's kind of wrapping their head around it. One of the main things I want to just remind you, draw your attention to in those resources on the Atlas website is that we have this great set of capstone tasks, adult diploma tasks that were developed over over the course of the last year or so. These are examples, these are resources, they are not required, but they are activities, resources that you can use with your students and that you can use to produce evidence that you use in the adult diploma portfolio when the completion option is adult ed instruction. So there's a screenshot of those, and then a little more info specifically, or an example when you click into like this ELA speaking and listening task. Each one of these have a number of different documents, materials that you would use specifically with students, as well as resources and explanations and guides for you as the teacher. So if you have not checked out those these capstones and these example tasks on the Atlas website, I really encourage you to do that. And I just want to recognize the folks who made this project happen. This was kind of an idea we had, I don't know, not this past summer, but the summer before, I think. We said, let's get some folks on board to make some really solid examples for the group. And so that project was really overseen by Christine at Atlas. And then there were 4 task writers who worked on that: Christy, Jen, Chris, and Stephanie. So really appreciative to those 4 folks who put in a lot of time and work. And then there was support, from some of us at the leadership level. So just want to acknowledge that group of people and that project, and remind you that that is one particular resource of note and hopefully of use to you that lives on the Atlas website. All right, and then the last update I have for you at this point. I want you to know that we try to maintain a pretty accurate email list for all the folks across the state who are working in adult diploma programs and who need information about adult diploma, including, for example, like registration information for this event today. Recently, I've heard from a number of folks like, oh, I'm not getting information, or oh, I'm not on the list. So we have realized we might need to do a check and make sure that we have the right names on our list. So Astrid has put in the chat a link to a Google Doc that has the list, the email list that we are using to get out information about adult diploma stuff. I invite you to click on that link and take a look at that document. It's organized by program, so find your program. And if you notice anything that needs to change or anything that needs to be updated, please send those changes or updates to myself and my colleague Neil. Neil is the one on our team who really maintains all of our email lists. So that link that Astrid shared, that's a view-only link. You will not be able to edit that document, but I do ask you to go ahead and take a look and see if you notice anything that needs to be updated or changed. And if you do, go ahead and put that in an email. If you want to write an email right now, you certainly can. If you want to do that after this meeting, that is fine as well. I'm just going to pause here for a second. Hopefully you are looking at that document. Can you just confirm for me in the chat? Are you able to open the document? Maybe, hopefully, some of you are opening that document and seeing, yep, that looks correct for my team. Okay, thank you, Danelle. All right. Good. Okay. Yep. I'm glad that some of you are seeing that. I'm glad you can open it. Glad that you're seeing that your info is correct. I think it's probably pretty close, but I want to make sure. Great. Want to make sure that there aren't any Any updates that we're missing? All right, good. Looks like it's good for Glacial Lakes, good for Osseo. Okay, yeah, great. Thank you, Matt. If you have some updates to submit, that'd be great. Yeah, that makes sense, Andy. You might have some new teachers, but not ready for them to join this list yet. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yep. And in the future, just so you know, as you have new teachers, if you have new staff, or if somebody leaves and you know that there needs to be an update to this particular email list, you can definitely reach out to me. You can also reach out to my colleague, Neil, and their email is here on the bottom of this slide. All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Trying to group source that work a little bit of updating that list. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to pause here for a second before we move on. Those were just updates, reminders, announcements. Anybody have any questions about anything at this point, or any other updates or reminders that anybody else has for the group? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Great, so at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jenny to give us some updates about SID.
Hi, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, you sound good, Jenny.
Check or anything? Okay, great.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I am Jenny Schlagebear, and as Jody said, I am supporting SID and working behind the scenes on all the adult diploma updates we've been doing for the last little while. So I'm just here today to just give a few updates and actually to ask you all to update something. And so I'm just going to launch right into that. Before I even get started on the fun update that we think you will enjoy about, about receiving information about when something gets changed on the diploma, we would like you all to go in and update a little information about your own program, because we have noticed that there are some diploma locations within SID, within various sites who offer the diploma, that might have some old information about who your contact is for that diploma location. So we thought we'd actually just take a moment during this session to let you all go off onto another tab and open up SID and take a look at who you have listed as your diploma location contact and update it if you need to. So I'm going to show you how you do that. So if you are logged into SID, if you click on the admin tab right there, oops, how did I get myself ahead? Then if you click on the manage adult diploma locations, which a minute ago had a red arrow next to it, what's going to pop up is, I keep moving ahead here and I can't. Oh,
no, that's me moving
Jody.
I'm trying to anticipate, Jenny.
I'm like, why am I clicking and nothing's happening? Oh my gosh, that's right. I'm not doing it. Okay, can you back up one little?
Yes.
One little
sorry, I was
call it animation.
Let's see. Okay, now I've clicked on. Oh. Okay. Is that where you want to be?
Yeah. So after you've clicked the manage adult diploma location, that link that's over on the left, then this screen is going to pop up and it's going to list all your various diploma locations. So if you're a program that only has one diploma location, you're just going to have one fiscal agent, one agency listed there, and the contact person's name. Just so you can see that contact person, you can see if that person is accurate, is still up to date. If you're a program that has a couple different locations, your screen might look more like what you see here on the screen, which you're going to have a couple different location names listed and the different contact people for those different locations. So you're going to have to look at a handful of them, perhaps, and we want you to look at those names and who that are associated with your various diploma locations and make sure they are up to date. And if you see one that needs to be edited, you need to change a staff who you have a new staff who's now the contact person for your diploma location. If you just click on the name, one of those rows, now if you click the next one, Jody, then you'll see what pops up. And then what you'll see is an editing screen for that diploma location. And then you can go in and you can just erase the name that's there and type in the person who should be the contact. And somebody's saying, thank you. All right, Danelle, great. And also the email, phone number, all that stuff. It's very quick, very easy. So we actually would like you all to go do that right now. So open another tab, look at your diploma, go to the admin tab at the top, click the Manage Adult Diploma Locations, and see all the various locations you have listed and take a quick glance and see if they're up to date or not. For Minneapolis, I think we have a question here. I think we need to add Summit, OIC, and PPL as additional providers. Okay. If you look at the screen that is, when you first click the Manage Adult Diploma Location, so the second little image on this screen here, on the right-hand side, which I cut off a little bit, is a place for you to create a new diploma location, Stephanie. So if you do need to create a new diploma location, like for Summit, OIC, and PPL, etc., that little box on the right will have all the info. You can type it all in and click save, and then voila, you'll have a new diploma location. We also have help documentation on the SID help system. So yeah, talk to your admin folks or managers about whoever needs to create those other diploma locations, but that's the way you do it. It's pretty straightforward and easy. So I'm just going to kind of pause talking for a second, but while everyone takes a look at your own SID site, click on the admin tab, click on the Manage Adult Diploma Location link, and see if your sites look like they're up to date or not. And if we can get some folks chiming in, that would be pretty cool. Saying that, yep, I'm able to look, they look good, or oops, something I need to update. I think we did have somebody say they're glad they figured out how to do it. Alex is looking good. Great, thank you, Julie. Also, if you are a big program, kind of like what the Minneapolis Stephanie was alluding to, if you are a big program with a couple different diploma location sites and you have a couple different admin staff who are able to go in and edit things, definitely talk to each other to make sure you're both not editing the sites. Okay, people are saying their diploma location, contact info is looking good. Great. So just wanted to get that out of the way. And then we're going to move on. I'll talk about a new update, which is notifications in the form of a message when your diploma, one of your students' adult diploma portfolio has been updated by MDE. Okay. So this is something we've been hoping to launch for a while, and we are finally just did over the past weekend. We did a update behind the scenes that's going to make this work. And what you're looking at here on the right-hand side is what your dashboard will look like when you receive a message update. Now, different from the person who is considered your contact for your diploma location site, these updates are going to go to the SID dashboard page of the staff person who submitted the domain for the student. Okay, so if you are the person who's the contact for your diploma location, but you have a data person who's putting in who's toggling the submissions and submitting the domains and areas, it's that person who submits the domain or area who will receive a notification that looks like this when Jody or Brandy updates the student's diploma on their side. Okay, so what's going to happen is the MDE folks, when they approve things, they don't approve the whole domain in one. They approve each individual area, as you are aware. That's been the new change since July. They're going to either pass or not pass each individual area. When that happens, that's going to send a message to the staff person that I just mentioned, the person who had submitted that area. And when they log into SID, they're going to see a message that looks like this. Going to say diploma has been updated for, and then the name of the student and the date. And instead of Urban Planet, it'll say the staff person's name who sent it. So either Jody, most likely, I think, at this point. It's not going to give much more detail than that, but it's going to give you the indication, okay, something's been updated. I'm going to go look at this diploma record now, and I'm going to see that Atticus Finch now has a couple passes and maybe one not pass. Okay. These notifications will automatically disappear after 7 days. And that's kind of just a default number that we chose. We can alter that if we decide, oh, we don't want them hanging out there. It just gets annoying and cluttery on your dashboard screen. But But just so you know, you can delete these as well. If you go and you look at Atticus's page and you see, okay, now I know that that's been updated, you can also delete these manually. So if you don't want to wait the 7 days for it to disappear on its own. Okay. Also, only up to 5 will appear on your dashboard screen. So you may have a flurry of them. So let's say the MDE staff approve like all 20, or they approve, 12 and they not pass a couple. That's more than 5. So you may get a whole flurry of them. But when you click on one of these, another screen is going to open that's going to have more of all the messages that you're going to see. So if there's a whole bunch of them, you'll be able to see them all. And then from that screen, you'll be able to click on one of them and it'll ask if you want to delete it. So that's how you can just kind of delete the messages. Once you've seen them, you'll be able to delete them. But now you've been given the message that something occurred to the diploma record. And if you're familiar with the logs and notification system in SID, all of these messages will be on that staff person's log page as well. Okay, are there any questions about that? It's kind of exciting, and we turned it on, but nothing is interesting will happen on your end until MDE does some passing or not passing. So the next round that they do, then somebody will be getting some notifications on their login screen. I'm sorry, their dashboard screen.
So Jenny, if we decide not to delete any of these, it'll just always show whatever the most recent 5 are. Is that correct?
Yeah, the most recent. Yep, it'll sort
Thanks.
by most recent to the top.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jenny, I just wanted to chime in and sort of give people a little bit the bigger picture is that what in the past up until now, what has always happened is you receive an email with your review results. Since we added this update in July that you can submit individual domains for review, that just became too onerous. It's just too many emails going back and forth, which is why we had asked, we talked about at our last working group meeting about having some kind of notification. So now, instead of you getting an email every time, you'll get this notification, which will be much more efficient. But just note that we will continue to send out emails on our end when it is the entire portfolio that is being reviewed, or when it's the last domain, that's the end, it's finished. It's either the student has completed and they get their diploma. So it's just all the in-between steps. We won't be sending out emails anymore. So I think it's good news. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. And then you can keep all the communication just within SID, and you'll be using the comments on the diploma page. Okay, so that's that update, and I'll be interested to hear how it works for people. If people are think it lasts too long, like they want it to disappear sooner, or if it's too much of a pain to click on it and delete it, or if it's just fine. A little bit of feedback will be good. So feel free to let us know how things are working for you when this starts rolling. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about on the next screen is, these are other minor little updates that occurred over the weekend, which are just kind of wording issues. So if you're looking at a student diploma record, it now, when a student has an area that was given a not pass, it now includes the date that not pass was assigned. That was something that didn't exist in the past, and we had to put that in. So that's there now. And then we did change the wording because Jody, as we talk, we realize we have some different vocabulary that we sometimes use, and we're trying to get on the same page. And I don't know if you remember, but the drop downs always called these things measures. So it would say life science measures. So then you would select whether they took the GED or have class credits or whatever. And we changed the wording to completion option because Jody and I realized that we were using different language. And so we're trying to get on the same page with that kind of stuff. While we're looking at the screen, I do want to point out that the top bit of a student's diploma screen, you are able to kind of like slide right past it and start selecting areas and hitting domains and submitting without updating this information up here, but we really, really need you to update that information at the top upon your first submission. Most importantly is the official transcript agency name, which is your diploma location. So speaking of language, maybe I should change that. From there, you will select which of your site's diploma locations the student is working at, and then you click Update Info. We can't have that update with each submission. That's just not how this screen works. So we need to ask you to do that right away and just do it the first time. And you can always update those 2 other paragraphs on the left, the description, the additional info. You can update, you can add more info to those pieces at any time, and then click Update Info again, and all that info will be updated. But it's very important to select the diploma location. That helps the MDE staff know who they need to be in touch with on bigger questions about a diploma. I think I see a question over here. So I'm having sound issues. Oh, who should be listed as the ADP contact person in SID?
Yeah, I think,
yeah.
let me give my 2 cents on this question, Jenny. So yeah, good question, Kirsten. So the question is, who should be listed as the contact person in SID? Should it be a local person by site or the advisor? So I would say that this is going to vary a little bit across the state, depending on how your diploma program is set up and how you're running your sites. But the important thing to know is that whoever is listed as that contact person is the person who will get the email with official review results at the end when the entire portfolio is rated a pass or not. So I believe typically that should probably be the advisor, but whether or not that's a person local to that same site might vary a little bit. So hopefully that makes sense, Kristen. Oh yeah, okay. Did you have any other thoughts about that, Jenny?
No, that seems like that's a business practice thing that you all.
Yep.
And
looks like Andy has his hand up. Andy, did you have a question about that too?
Yeah, just a heads up where Jenny's talking about that, 1 paragraph description of the ABE high school student. As reviewers, we do read that. I mean, that is very helpful for us as we're going through and evaluating any of the materials in there, just kind of know, who the student is, what they've been doing, that type of stuff. So please do put that information in.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Andy, because in my head, I still am thinking of the fact that description was always due at the very, very end in the past when the whole diploma was submitted at once. And was thinking, oh, maybe, when programs just want to send in math or they just want to send in English, maybe that description isn't as important until the very end. But you're right. Of course, it's important, even on the first submission. But it can be updated too.
Yes. And sometimes when you're putting it in there, we had issues like if you have somebody who has high school transcripts and they've got stuff for math, but you uploaded the stuff in English, you should be putting that in of, hey, this is in English, but if you write it in there, it helps us to note, oh, that's where I look for the transcript so that we're not searching around through the whole document.
Yeah, good. So kind of a little bit of keeping the data clear and clean. Great. Any other questions about this particular screen or anything else up to now? All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about quickly is the report that we have on the report tab. In this report, it's called the Adult Diploma Portfolio Report. And it's on the report tab with all the gazillions of other reports in SID. And I built this report like a long time ago to give programs the ability to just run a list to see the different sort of categories of where their students stand in the diploma process. And I've kind of let this report languish a little bit. And so I wanted to get a little feedback and I wanted to let you know some thoughts that I'm coming up with for how I might update this. And a lot of that has to do with, I've been working with Jody on the other side of things to make a report that they see and kind of separate students in the various statuses of their diploma. And I haven't really put the same energy into the one that you all see from the program side. So I wanted to just remind folks, first of all, that the report is there. And I want to run some thoughts past you and get some maybe some feedback, and also want to let you know that I might be updating some things. So if the report looks different in a couple days, it's because I'm updating, and I'll try to shoot out some emails maybe to that group list to let you know when updates happen. But also feel free, if you have some suggestions for this report, or if you see an update come through and it doesn't make sense to you, to just email any questions to me. I'm going to quickly put my email address in the chat. So that's the SID support email address. So if you do have questions about this report in the future, or anything else for that matter, please feel free to email me at that email address. So very quickly, this report, it's kind of got a lot of info on it. So it's a little bit of overload, I think. Now this first table is the one that I have the arrow pointing to. This table only appears on your report if you still have a student or two who you submitted their whole diploma in the previous process before middle of July. So the process back when it was you'd submit the whole diploma at once, all the areas, all the domains. And if that student then didn't pass for whatever reason, we didn't have it individual by area back then, so that the whole thing was kind of sent back to your program. And now that student you're going to have to resubmit that whole student's portfolio domain by domain if they're still active and you still want to move forward. So that's why they're in a slightly different table. They're at the top, and I've labeled that one MDE reply, not pass, parentheses, old process. I'm not very creative with names. So like I said, there's only like 3 programs, I think 4 programs that have a student in this situation. And I think at some point I might actually go behind the scenes and just kind of adjust it so that we'll just plop these students in with the rest of the students for whom you have to check the status, or maybe in the not yet submitted category actually is where they would fit. So yeah, and if I do that, if I decide I'm just going to go behind the scenes and clean up some of this, I will contact you for individual programs individually. But if you go ahead and run this report, and if you see somebody in that submitted MDE reply, not past old process box, you have one of those students. So I may be in touch with you to see how we can kind of clean that up, just so that we're all looking at the same kind of info. Okay, so the next table is students who are in various states of having had their diploma submitted. Okay, and so I just labeled that one submitted, check status of domain area. So that is all the students who either have the whole thing submitted or they have 1 or 2 domains submitted. And you can see them, they're organized by diploma location. And one thing you'll notice on this report is if you have some students for whom you've submitted a domain, but you forgot to toggle that diploma location at the top that I just mentioned on the previous screen, there is that little 3rd category there. On yours, it might be the 4th or 5th, where it says diploma location must be selected. If you have any students in that category, please go to their record and select their diploma location and click update so that we know which diploma location they're in. Now this report has a lot of fields, columns off to the right. If you were to click on a student's name, which you can't do on this presentation, but if you were to click on a student's name, it's going to open up and show you each of the domain areas, when you submitted it, what the status is, if it's still in the submitted status, or if it's been not passed, or if it's passed. So it's a nice summary of where all your students stand. And I'll get back to this table because this is the one that I probably want to do some updates on, the main one. The next table is all your students who passed. So if you're a big program like corrections, for example, this table runs for pages and pages because they have so many students who've passed over the years. And when you initially run this report, you can select some date ranges. The default is a really wide date range, so it's going to show all the students who ever passed. And then the table below that is called not yet submitted. And this, you also might have a lot of students on this, and this is showing you students for whom you have toggled 1 or 2 or more of the areas, but you have not submitted the whole domain. Okay, so you this group of students might really just probably grew over time because you had students who came in, you figured out they had a few items, you toggled them, but you never submitted because they never had all 20. And at this point, they still don't have a whole domain. So you might have a bunch of students who are in that category. So that can get a little unwieldy too, but they needed to be on their own table. So the questions I wanted to ask are about the second one, that second one that shows you the submitted group. Now, some of the updates Jody and I worked back and forth on to figure out ways to organize this to make it more kind of useful to look at instead of having like this huge list of students who are in various states of submission. I divided this table for Jody into a couple different subsets. And one is students who have the whole full portfolio submitted versus students who have a handful or one domain submitted. And do you think as programs that would be useful for you as well to have those two groups kind of separated? And maybe just chime in if you think that makes sense. And then the other way I distinguish them is if the next step that needs to be taken is in the hands of MDE, or if the next step that needs to be taken is in the hands of you as a program because you need to revisit one of the submissions. So for Jody, that makes sense because she wanted to focus on all those students for whom they have a submission waiting for MDE to take the next step. MDE has to go in and assign a pass or not pass, versus the whole set of students for whom they've already said pass, not pass, and now the program needs to either resubmit or just work on the future other domains. Does that kind of distinction make sense to programs on your end as well? Or is that a little bit too fine, granular thinking? Okay, I have one reply. Makes sense to me, Marion. And I think that came in when I was talking about breaking people who have a full diploma submitted versus students who have partial diploma submitted. I think to me that logically seems like a good separation. I also would likely move the submitted, the two bottom tables to like a second and third page of the report. You're a little confused about the last option. So that option is after you submit, say you submit a domain area, you as a program, you have a student and you submit their math domain. Or really this is actually kind of more relevant for a full diploma when all 5 of the domains have been submitted. Once they're all submitted, you as a program can't do anything about that diploma until you've heard back from MDE. So I was making a distinction between diplomas that are in a situation where they're waiting for MDE to reply versus all the diplomas on your end that you may say they're in process and it's the program's turn to update the information. I do think maybe that is a little kind of a granular detail that might not be particularly useful on your end, but it might be.
Yeah, a couple thoughts, Jenny, and please continue. Anybody who has any thoughts or response to Jenny's questions, go ahead and put that in the chat. I do think a decent number of folks who are listening right now have a very small number of adult diploma students.
Yeah.
So I do think like I'm curious if anybody, as you were listening, did you pull up this report in SID and how many students does it show on it? Because if if you're running a relatively small program, those kind of distinctions probably aren't necessary.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of programs across the state that are, larger, and then that's where I think the distinctions become more important.
And more
potentially,
useful,
or more
maybe.
useful.
Yeah.
But you might not get a ton of feedback from the whole group right now because some folks, I suspect, don't have a lot of students listed on this report at all.
Right. And if it is a small program, then you're very likely to kind of know without even having to look at a report about kind of who's at what status. So
right.
yeah,
and
I understand that as well.
Yeah, and let me also kind of say in my words, what you're talking about, Jenny, with that second question or that second distinction that you were talking about is really a difference between have you submitted something and you're waiting for the review results, or like that would be one status, or have you received review results, something didn't pass, and now you need to edit or add or change something in order to resubmit. That's the distinction that Jenny is talking about. And again, I think for a small program, you know that without running a report in SID, because you know all of your students,
Right.
you know, inside and out. But for a larger program, maybe that is useful.
Okay, well, I will probably make that first distinction between the a completed diplomas versus the kind of partial ones. I think that pretty much makes sense.
Yep.
I might be adding more columns as well. I don't have on here the one when we have a not passed date. We might want to add that. So just keep your eye out. If you do regularly run this report, just notice there might be some changes coming up. Hopefully they'll be self-explanatory, or if there's something big, I'll let you all know. So that's kind of what I had to say about the report. One last thing, and then about the notifications, I realized I didn't mention. So since we made this update over the last weekend, any submission from here and forward, the submitted area will be linked to the name of the staff person who submitted it. All of the ones that were done prior, they aren't linked to the staff person who submitted it. So I had to go in and do some behind the scenes linking of submitted areas to the staff people who I think submitted it based on people who submitted previous things before we changed the system to section by section. It feels like, I think that's a little bit more info than you need to know, but I will probably be contacting some of your programs to make sure that I have the correct info staff person listed for the already submitted sections, so that we can make sure that that staff person is the one who gets the notification when those are either passed or not passed. From this point forward, you don't have to worry about that. That's going to do it itself automatically. Whoever submits it, their info will be linked to that submission, and then the update will go to their dashboard screen. I hope that makes sense. So if you get an email from me asking which staff on your site is the one who submitted the previous ones, please respond so I can get that data behind the scenes cleaned up. Thank you. And then I see we have another question, clarifying question. I just opened that report and I see that some partial portfolios were recently passed. I didn't get a notification. The notification piece begins today. So you won't be from here on out, when something is updated and passed or not passed, that's when the notifications will start happening. So that was a brand new update as of technically yesterday. Okay, I think that's all for SID updates. Are there any other questions kind of overall? Good.
All right, thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Good to get some updates and I feel like we have made so much progress. And some of you who've been around and involved in this project for a couple of years or more than a couple of years will remember we used to build portfolios in LearnerWeb. Do you remember those days? And that was real clunky. And then the shift into SID was like a huge improvement. And now this change from submitting the whole portfolio to submission by domain is a big improvement. So I really feel like we've made a lot of progress over the last couple of years. So it's exciting. All right, so kind of following up on what Jenny was talking about, I want to give you some updates about portfolios and reviews. So I've been talking about this for a while now, but we have officially hit the mark of having more than 1,000 adult diplomas granted here in the state of Minnesota since 2015, since the beginning of this project. So I personally think that's a pretty remarkable remarkable statistic for this being kind of a very grassroots effort, and an effort that really like came out of our field. It was really folks in the field who said, hey, we need another option for our adult students. And people got together and they worked on, you know, figuring out what proposed legislation could say, and they advocated and got that legislation passed into state statute. And then we've really sort of put together all of the pieces of how does this thing work. We've, you know, built and made all these improvements on the portfolio system, and yeah, 1,000 individuals have received this credential since we started. So yeah, kudos to you all who are, you know, really making this work on the ground with your students. I think also at this point, it's really important to recognize that actually the majority of those 1,000 people are individuals who are or have been or were at the time incarcerated at the correctional facility in Faribault. So that Faribault program has really been the heavy lifter in terms of getting students through this diploma program over the last 5 years. So shout out to you all at Faribault, but in general, yeah, just like pat yourself on the back. And I think it's a pretty amazing landmark to pass, in my opinion. I tried really hard to figure out how I could put some animation on this slide to like make confetti fly around or something, but then I realized I didn't have that kind of time. So anyway, so in terms of current reviews and sort of where we are at the moment. So at the moment we have, there are 7 complete portfolios that are currently under review. So that means that those portfolios have all 5 domains submitted and they're just waiting for everything to pass. And then if everything passes, we'll, you know, have the diploma completed. In addition to that, we currently have more than 50 students who have partial portfolios submitted. So by partial portfolio, that means a student that has 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of the domains submitted, but not all 5. So since we turned on this option in July, we have consistently had a lot of these. And so I want to give you some details about what we are sort of figuring out about the timeline and the process for how these reviews work. So on your end, if you submit a full portfolio, all 5 of those domains, or the final domain, the last one to submit, then we will work very hard and do our very best to have that review completed within 30 days, sometimes even a little sooner than 30 days. So that's always been kind of the standard timeline, and what we've always said is please allow 30 days for a review. If you submit 1 or more domains, so a couple of domains, but not all 5 of them, then just know that those are going in the queue. They are going, you know, in the lineup. And that is what Wendy from LAN is instrumental in helping us organize those reviews and get them assigned to reviewers and get them processed. But there's just candidly too many of those for us to be able to get to them all in 30 days. So we will process them first in, first out, you know, the earlier submissions first. We have a goal of turning things around in 30 days, but frankly, we don't have enough capacity to do that currently. And the reason is because I just want to reiterate and make sure everyone is aware. The reason that reviews take time is because the review team is looking at every piece of evidence and carefully evaluating it to ensure that we can see in the evidence that the student has demonstrated mastery of the competency. So when the evidence is a GED test, that's very easy and the review is very quick. When the evidence is adult education instruction, when the completion option is adult education instruction, that it takes longer for the reviewers to look at. So I just want you all to sort of be aware of this, the very human element of this review process. That is why it takes some time. We didn't really know what to expect when we turned on this option to be able to submit by domain. it's great. I think it's a good benefit for students out there in the field to be able to have a domain or two pass while they're still working on the others. But it's definitely been a heavy lift on our end, on the review end. So we just continue to ask for your understanding and your grace in terms of your expectations about the timeline for review. But please do keep submitting those. It's really gratifying to see all of the students who are sort of in the process at this point. All right, so at this point, we're about an hour in here. I want to encourage you, and I'm doing the same, to stand up for a second if you need to. Stretch your neck and your back a little bit if you need to. We will have a break coming after this next chunk of content. We'll take a break and step away for a few minutes, but I am gonna move us through just sort of one more piece of content before we take a longer break. So at this point, I want to let you know, remind you that we had a really great training a couple of weeks ago. This was the first time we have ever offered this training. It was on October 7th, and it was about high quality evidence for adult diploma portfolios. And I think many of you who are here right now were also in that training, which is great. It was sort of a second part of the Adult Diploma 101, so the training for new adult diploma programs and staff. That we do that event was recorded, so I encourage you, if you didn't attend that, you might want to check out that recording, especially if you are in the work of putting together a student portfolio, and especially if you're thinking about how to use adult education instruction and what good evidence would look like. I encourage you to take a look at that recording and at that event. It was a really great training, and I'm grateful for Lindsay and Christine who really shared their expertise with us about ELA and math on that day. So one of the things that happened, because that was the first time that we had ever offered that training, we weren't exactly sure about the timeline and the content, and we ended up taking longer than we thought with some of the content, and had to we weren't able to get through all of the content that we wanted to get through on that training. So this piece of that training, this was a piece from that training that I had planned to present on the 7th, but we ran out of time. So I'm going to take a few minutes here today to run through some information about when you are using high school credits as the completion option in the portfolio. I know there's a few of you listening in right now who are sort of old hat and who have done this a lot. So consider it just, a refresher. But I think for many of us, in many cases, it can be really tricky when you're looking at a student's transcript to figure out how it kind of translates, how it fits into the standard adult diploma portfolio. So this is really to help you kind of give you a little bit of sort of a starting place and some guidelines about using high school credits in the portfolio. So when you're going to use high school credit as the completion option for any area or domain in the portfolio, the evidence documents that you need to include are the official transcript from the school or the district that awarded that high school credit. And in addition, please include a document that shows your analysis or notes or explanation. And I have some suggested formats for those coming up here. So this is just a screenshot of a high school transcript. This one is just really nice in the sense that there's a little color coding here. It's certainly not required to do this, but it does, makes it easy for us to see. I can see at a glance that the orange ones are math and yellow is science and blue are ELA. So that's just a nice example of an official transcript, and just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So this is an actual high school transcript, right? So when a student comes to you and you're figuring out, adult diploma might be a good option for this student, and you help them get a hold of their official transcript, and then you're sitting down in front of it, the next sort of the work you have to do is to analyze what's on that transcript and what can be used in the adult diploma portfolio. So what we really recommend that you do is that you use a form to actually kind of break down into these adult diploma domains and areas, what courses from the high school transcript will fit. So this is one evaluation form. This one I think originally was developed by the folks in St. Cloud. So we do have that one as a possibility for you to use. This is on the Atlas website in the Adult Diploma Resource Library. You can find a blank copy of this particular transcript analysis form. This is another one. This one comes from the folks in Detroit Lakes. So, you'll see it looks a little different, but sort of the same idea of breaking down into the adult diploma areas and then thinking about specifically which courses on the transcript align. What's helpful about this one is this one makes it really clear about thinking about on the transcript, how do credits work out in terms of years? You do have to be conscious that different high schools award credits differently. And we really need to think about how many years, in some cases, we need to be thinking about how many years of high school work does that represent? So sometimes you have to do some math to make that clear. So when you are looking at, when you have a student who comes to you with a high school transcript, which is a document like this, then that does need to go in the adult diploma portfolio. And what we are suggesting is that you also include a document like this or like this. These are two examples of a transcript analysis form that really helps us as reviewers sort of connect the dots between what we are seeing on the transcript and what you are using in the portfolio. So this is another screenshot from that second form option this is a nice feature that it just really makes clear, like, okay, these are the courses the student had, and these are how we are going to align them or use them for the 4 areas in the adult diploma. So that's a helpful feature of this form. Now that I am presenting to you about this, I can't remember for sure whether this one has been added to the Atlas Resource Library. I think maybe it has not yet, but I will make sure that this option for a transcript analysis form gets up there as well. Oh, I do believe that both of these forms, both this form and this form are in the participant materials folder from our October 7th training. And when we take a break, I will make sure that I get the link out to all of you for that, so you can access those there. So, okay, so you have a transcript document, you do some analysis of it, and you kind of lay that out for us using some kind of an analysis form. So these are some of the questions and some of the things you need to be thinking about as you are doing that analysis. So one thing is that one complication sometimes is you sometimes need to be thinking about courses and sometimes need to be thinking about credits. So all of this is laid out on the competency completion options document. So always be referring to that document as you're analyzing a transcript. But for ELA and math, remember that you need to think about credits. And when we say credit, we mean 1 credit equals 1 year. So basically, for ELA and math, you need to be thinking about how many years of high school credit has the student earned. However, science and social studies are a little bit different. For science and social studies, the completion option requires courses, not necessarily credits. So that was a choice made by the original working group back in 2014, 2015, as we were all trying to figure out how, the nuts and bolts of how this adult diploma process worked. That was a decision made at that point. We've had a lot of debate about it since then. It's possible it might change at some point, but for now, for science and social studies, you can use individual courses as the completion option. That course may be less than a full high school year. If it is listed on the transcript and it has a passing grade, then it is considered a course. So the first thing, so one question you're going to want to ask when you look at a student's high school transcript is to try to decide if high school credits can be used for an entire domain or, all 4 areas. So the standard for that is pretty high, but we do see it sometimes. I would say we see it least often in ELA. So in order to have high school credits complete the entire area of ELA, that student has to have passed 4 years of English classes, including a speech class. And we don't very often see that, but occasionally, because if they passed 4 years of English, most of the time they graduated, but we know sometimes there's something weird of like they missed a physical education credit or something. So that's possible, but it's a pretty high bar for ELA. And keep in mind, even if your student has 4 years of English classes, even if they have speech, every portfolio all the time always requires a student writing sample. So they will still have to do a piece of student writing, even if they have 4 years of English classes. Okay, so keep that in mind. For math, if your student has 3 years of math classes that cover all the required content, then then you can use high school credits for the domain, the entire domain. Same for social studies and science, except for social studies and science, those are courses, not credits. So they don't necessarily have to have a full 3 years for social studies and science, although that is typical. That is what we would expect. And that is most often what you would see, that a student would have 3 full years of social studies or science in order to be able to use that for the entire domain in the portfolio. Andy, I saw that your hand was up. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just that note, like about ELA, that they have to put in a writing sample.
Yes.
That was specifically addressed in the working groups a long time ago, that writing sample can be something that they wrote in one of their high school classes if they still have it. They don't have to write something new. If they have a writing that they did 3 years ago that meets the ELA or the level E standards, that is usable for that.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Andy. That is true. And I would say in that case, the teacher and or advisor would have to work pretty closely with the student to make sure that that piece of writing meets all of the required criteria in the checklist. But yeah, absolutely. You do not have to have your students start over with a brand new piece of writing if they sort of bring something with them that they could use. I would say it's possible they might need, you should probably take a look at it with them and make sure, and it's possible they would need to revise it, but they definitely don't need to start from scratch on a brand new piece of writing. It could be something they've already done.
Yes, and there's a couple of things in the in the chat that
Yes.
I had that same question because we've got that going on right now.
Okay, let's, so looking at Christie's question, including speech. Sorry, Christy, I have lost, I wonder if you want to, do you want to unmute Christy and ask your question? Because I'm not,
Sure,
I've
I
lost
can
exactly the context, so go ahead.
When you said that you have to have 4 high school credits in English, including a speech class, I didn't think that's how it read. For prior experience, A1 high school with 4 credits, it says completion of 4 English language arts high school credits. A course credit is equivalent to a student successfully completing an academic year of study or mastering the subject matter as determined by the local school district, and acceptable completion of student writing that is scored by a rubric. It doesn't say anything about us specifically having to have one of those credits as a speech class.
You're right, Christy. I am also looking at the competency completion options document. Yep, you're right. It does say that.
Because we have a thing up for review right now, a student that was up that I was looking at, and it's like, well, it doesn't have a speech class. And then I went back and re-looked at the completion options and went, oh, it doesn't require one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, okay, so now you all are seeing live how this review process is kind of a human process, and we do run into these kind of questions, these kind of nuanced questions quite a bit. So I think the understanding is that in order to earn either a regular high school diploma, according, the graduation requirements set in state statute, or this standard adult high school diploma, speech is required content, right? And so I guess I have always assumed that if we are saying that a student has completed the ELA domain by the work they did in high school, that what part of what we're saying is that that work must have included speech. Now, I guess the sort of the nuance question is, what if the transcript doesn't specifically list that? Yeah, and that's what I see. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. That's what Denise is saying, that that speech is embedded into most ELA classes, which totally makes sense, right? Like, students rarely have a class titled reading, or a class, that a course that's called writing, but we just understand that that is embedded into high school English. So yeah, okay, I agree with, I think I am agreeing with Andy and Christy that if a student has 4 complete years of English classes, the assumption is that those classes included content on speech, but the transcript doesn't have to show that there is a course named speech. So hopefully that makes sense. However, and this is, I think, Nancy, what you're pointing out in the chat, if a student has a high school transcript with less than 4 years of English credits, the only way they can use that as the completion option for speaking and listening is if they have a class on their transcript specifically called speech. So it's certainly possible for a student to use their high school credits as the completion option for speaking and listening, even if they don't have a full 4 years of English credits on their transcript. And that's why that is called out separately on the completion options document.
Can we confirm with Lee's question?
Yeah, so Lee, if a student has 4 years of high school credits, high school ELA credits on their transcript, or if they have a course on their high school transcript that is specifically called speech with a passing grade. In either of those 2 instances, then high school credit can be used as the completion option in the adult diploma portfolio, and there's no additional evidence or work required.
Jody?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was
No,
on a
worries.
telephone call and so I ducked in here late or
Yep.
stepped in here late. Over the years, the speaking and listening subset, we always said that you have to have the speaking portion of it, even if you had all 4 years, if there was nothing in the 4 years that spoke to speech in the course description in one of the years, or if you had a separate speech credit, a class in the speech, or if you were in speech and debate. Those are acceptable. Like we've used those as acceptances for that requirement.
Okay, so yeah, interestingly, so I think we've now seen both sides of this argument now. Again, this is an example of why these portfolio reviews get real messy sometimes. And I think, okay, so this question of using high school credits for speech and the 4 years of English classes, I think is something that we will probably need to, the review team will probably need to put our heads together about this and make a clearer statement about it. But if I do see, Stephanie, your comment about if there's a course that's called oral communication or effective communication, that might work, especially if you can confirm with the district what the content of that was. Yeah.
And on a personal level, I agree with the things that are coming through, that I thought we had to have a speech, and that was my understanding. But when I looked at the write-up, the write-up does not say that. So,
yep.
Whether it's implied that you should have, or it's implied that you have to, implied doesn't work. You have to go with what's written. So
yeah,
I would agree that on a personal level, I would not want to pass one that doesn't have a speech or something on it. But because the completion options does not list that specifically, I'm going with what it says in the completion options.
Can I chime in
We've had
too?
this discussion several times over the years.
Yeah, we have. And
Several
I'm going to say we might have to table it for today. And this is why we need to reconvene our subgroups, because this really is a question, I think, for the ELA subgroup to take on. I want to recognize, Lee, I know you've been involved since the get-go, so I do sort of trust the fact, if you remember having had that discussion, then yeah, then
I've had portfolios approved with it. And as a matter of fact, speech and debate, being a part of extra co-curricular speech team.
Yeah,
It was approved with validation from the teacher and the
yeah,
coach.
no, I absolutely, that can be approved. Yeah, there's no question. If your student has a
But-
course like speech or debate on the transcript, absolutely you can use that. I think the question is, what if they don't?
But it
the
does
question
not
where we don't
replace
agree.
1 year of English credit either, by the same token, or a part of a credit of English language.
Yep.
arts. So
Yep. Yeah, okay,
I'm
trying
muting.
to, Christy, did you have something else that you want, or I'm not sure if that was Christy or Stephanie who had something else you wanted to add?
It was me, but we can totally table it. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. I think, this is reiterating to me why we need to have content subgroups and really be able to dig into these questions. Because if we try to answer all of these questions as a whole group, boy, it's just a lot. All right. So I'm going to keep us going. I'm just taking a little quick look at the chat. To see if there's anything. I am going to table this particular issue about speech right now. In terms of a question about will you be reviewing a few sample writing and speech samples that meet requirements? We're not going to talk about we're not going to look at any sample evidence today. However, I do encourage you to look at the recording for the training on October 7th, where we did show a bunch of examples of evidence. All right, I'm going to keep us going. I totally recognize that it's frustrating not to have clear-cut answers, and I assure you that the review team is just as frustrated as you all, because we do get into these sticky situations. We do the best we can. As Andy has said, we always default to what the competency completion options document says. So please always be looking at that document. Now, even that, sometimes there's some interpretation involved, even the words on the page, but we do our best to be consistent with that document. Okay, I'm going to keep us going. All right, so a few more things sort of to think about as you are looking at the high school transcript and trying to use it in the adult diploma portfolio. Sometimes what can be really, it's really easy sometimes if you see that the names of the high school courses in on the transcript align perfectly to the adult diploma areas. Like, for example, if you see algebra and geometry on the transcript, that's great, that's easy. However, we can recognize that that is not always the case, right? So like in this example, here you've got a student who took Math 9, Math 10, Math 11. So I'll put the question out to you for now. What, if you see this on a transcript, what additional explanation or information or evidence would you think about or try to gather in order to include this in the adult diploma portfolio? What questions would you be asking? Yeah, right, Heather. What is covered in each of those years? Yep. And how would you find the answer to that question? Yep. You could certainly pick up the phone and call the school. Yes, if you have access to course descriptions, Christy, on the district website or otherwise, because it might be your local district that you're connected to and you've already gotten some information from them because you've seen transcripts before. So yeah, you're going to need to do some digging. As Andy is saying, you cannot assume. Unfortunately, this particular transcript as is with no additional evidence would not be sufficient to pass the math area in the adult diploma. So keep that in mind. So when you're in this scenario, well, actually, so sorry, we kind of already got to some of this conversation that I have on these slides earlier. So when you're looking at ELA, oh, sorry, okay. Yeah, I wanted to skip. Okay, I'm going to skip on to math here for a second. So when you are looking at math credits, like we were looking at on that past portfolio, if there's less than 3 total years of math, you know that no more than 3 of the areas can be completed, right? And you will have to potentially do some investigation with the district to figure out which courses they were, right? Same thing is true of social studies. If you have, if there is a course on the transcript that's listed that's named clearly, a name that aligns with one of our adult diploma areas, such as economics, if it has a passing grade, you can use that to complete an individual area. If you're looking at science and you see a course on the transcript, again, that has a name that's clearly aligned with the adult diploma portfolio areas, such as life science, you can use that to complete an individual area. But, and this was the point I was getting to earlier, if the course names in any of those circumstances are unclear, like that Math 9, Math 10, Math 11, or sometimes we see that in social studies, like they're just called social studies, then you need to verify content, you need to do a little more digging, and you need to find some more information, perhaps on a website, perhaps by contacting the district. And then as you do that, you're going to make notes about that on your transcript analysis form or in the notes section of the SID portfolio so that we as reviewers can see how you verified the content and what source you got that from. So here's an example of how this is an actual screenshot from a portfolio. So this was a portfolio that used high school credits for all of the areas of math. And so this was an example where the transcript just listed math survey for one of the math courses. And so the advisor was able to, get on the phone and talk to someone in the district and confirm that all of the data and statistics standards were covered in that particular course. And they attached the syllabus from that course. So this is an excellent example of how you might need to do some more legwork. For example, if you see a course called Math Survey, and then please sort of document and make it clear for us as reviewers what your research, what you found in your research, and the evidence to show the alignment. And this is an example of a case where this portfolio passed, or this domain passed, I can't remember which, with that evidence. So that is a pretty brief, but sort of a framework or a starting point for how you should think about looking at the high school transcript and using what you see on the high school transcript as evidence in the portfolio. So basically, just to review quickly, what I want you to hear is that if the course names are really obvious, that makes it really easy. If the course names are not as obvious, then you will need to do a little bit of extra work, but just show your work, and it still can pass. Andy, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, just on this one where it, I've got the math survey here and it's got geometry, statistics, and algebra. Fantastic. If this is one course and it's one credit, you can't count that for all of those. So this would have had to have been like 3 years of math survey, or have 3 credits of math survey to hit each of the total areas.
Yeah, and I was thinking that too as I was looking at this slide, Andy. They must have been, since we passed it. So yes, this must be a scenario where there were at least 3 full years of high school course credit, and maybe there were 3 years called math survey, or maybe there was 1 year of algebra, 1 year of geometry, and 1 year. The last year was called math survey, something like that. So yeah, good point. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, that would be fine.
Yep. Let's see, Drew, good question. Where's the best place to provide this documentation, on the transcript eval or the comments in SID? I think, in my opinion, either is fine. This is an example of somebody put it right into the comment box in SID. I'm fine with that. It can certainly also go on the transcript evaluation form. Both of the forms that I showed you have like a notes column, and that would be a good place to put it as well. I think it maybe depends on how long is your comment and how many do you have. Sometimes the SID screen gets really cluttered if you've got a lot, but either one is fine for me. Yeah, no problem. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in. I know that it's a lot to think through all the details of using high school credits in the portfolio, but I really encourage you just to sort of take them as they come, right? As a student gives you a transcript, it's a bit of a puzzle. Try to fit in as many pieces as you can, try to get as much info as you can, and then if wherever they are missing, then you're going to fill in, usually with adult ed instruction or with GED tests. All right, at this point, I think we deserve a break. So let's take a break, step away for a second. Maybe, hopefully you can make yourself a nice cup of tea like this. And let's get started again in 10 minutes. So Wendy, if you want to pause the recording. Thank you, Wendy. At this point, I am going to, 2 things that I'm going to do. One, Astrid and I are going to work behind the scenes here, and we're going to share with you the link to the participant folder from our Adult Diploma 101 training that we did earlier, and that has in it the documents that I was showing you, those transcript analysis documents, in case you want to use those. And while we're working on that, I am going to turn it over to Brad to get us started and give us some updates about high school equivalency stuff. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. I think I'm going to turn it over to Brandy.
Thanks, Jody.
Yep.
So we just wanted to kind of mention a couple of updates. We've already given the language out before, but just reminders of what's going on in high school equivalency. So if you can go to the next slide. First thing we want to talk about is that we are a 2-test state. So HiSET is coming to Minnesota. It's officially not here yet, but we are working with PSI and getting it implemented. So we will be soon a 2-test state, which is just another option for our Minnesota adult ed students to take when trying to earn their high school equivalency, which is a fantastic option. Next slide. Perfect. So this is our timeline. This is where we're at when we're working with the HiSET. We just finished our fall South North regionals. And so the pilot is on its way of being implemented at between 8 to 10 testing sites throughout the state. We have some small ones and some large ones, and we also are implementing some Department of Corrections test sites as well, just to give us some better understanding and feedback and data on how to implement HiSET for all of our testing centers that wish to participate in giving the HiSET at their location. We're also finishing up or continuing with the 3-week series of deep dive webinars. We had our first one last Monday, and the next one will be the following Monday from today, which is the 24th. And then we have our final one, which will be Halloween on the 31st. And you can find registrations for those at the LAN on the calendar for the events. And then, of course, through that, we'll be going through logistics and student advising. And then our goal is to roll out the state with any other test centers that want to participate come January after the holiday. Next slide. HiSET overview. So we're kind of going back to an older, what you used to be used to of the 2002 series of GED. It's 5 tests. So we have reading and writing as 2 separate tests. So we're used to the GED having those together, and HiSET separates the 2. And then that 3rd test is math. We have science and social studies. So it's a 5-test battery. And the next slide, we talk about that score. So the score range is from 0 to 20. The minimum passing score is 8 per test. But if you look a little bit closer, 8 times 5 is not 45. So the minimum total passing is 45. So it's kind of what we're used to back in the old days where you could, I guess, borrow, extra points from one test subject to another. But the goal is, on average, a student is going to need a 9 or higher to achieve that 45. So if they made an 8 on one subject, they could still possibly pass, but then other test subjects would have to be a higher score to level out and accumulate the 45 total. We want to make that very clear and let everyone understand that process of the scoring, so it's not a surprise when we do actually have students start testing. And also we're going to talk about adding the HiSET to a completion option. And so now Brad's going to take over with that.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, I'm glad that we finally have our proposal ready for you as our adult diploma working group on how HiSET will be built into the standard adult diploma and what HiSET will mean as a set of completion options. This proposal was emailed to you as part of the registration before the working group, so you might want to check that out there. And then I also just want to let you know that as we dive through this, we're going to go domain by domain, starting with English language arts here. And we'll be talking through each and every one of the domains and what that proposal really looks like on how HiSET will be built in. Astrid's going to put into the chat a link to the proposal, how to embed HiSET as a completion option for standard adult high school diploma. So that will be in the chat in case you don't have the email with the proposal listed out. I'm really hoping that folks were able to take a quick look at that and that you're able to see that before today, but no worries if you were not, we will talk through it. And also, just as we get started, you'll see here on the left-hand side that it says test question mark. The question mark is just meant to note that with each completion option, if you look at the completion options document, it will say like test A or prior experience A or adult education instruction. So there's always kind of like which test which type of completion option it is. So in this case, it's a test. And then there's a corresponding letter afterwards. And in this case, I just wasn't sure what the corresponding letter would be yet. So that's why it's a question mark. So I just don't want you to get tripped up on that question mark on the far left column. What's more important is the content in the other columns here. So let's dive in. So with this, you'll notice with each of the proposals, there's frequently if the minimum score for that subject is if the score is an 8, there's one option, and if the score is a 9, there might be a different option. So here with English language arts, what we're proposing is that if you have a score of 9 in reading, then you can pass out of the reading section without any additional work. If you have a score of 8 on the reading test, then you will need to demonstrate competency mastery in 1 level E standard from the CCRS for reading, using a reading that has been quantitatively and qualitatively evaluated at the high school level. So that will be kind of one additional step if they have the score of 8 instead of 9, just acknowledging that they passed that subject test, but they didn't quite fully demonstrate high school equivalency according to how HiSET has their scores set up. So that is how the 8 and 9 look different. And of course, that demonstrated competency could ideally be part of your instruction that you do with that student as you help them prep for the HiSET test. In writing and language, there's only an option for 8 because with HiSET, with every student in the portfolio needing a piece of student writing that scores at level E or that meets the minimum standards, that's one of the minimum requirements for all of our student portfolios for the standard adult diploma. We kept that you just have to have a score of 8 and you just continue to put your student writing in that portfolio like you would for any other student. And so 8 is high enough for reading for writing and language if you get an 8 in the HiSET language arts writing test, and just continue to put that piece of student writing in the portfolio as well. So there's no 9 option for writing and language. That is what the English language arts proposal looks like. I want to give you a chance to take a look at that, and also just what questions do you have any questions about the English language arts domain, this proposal or this one part of the proposal? If you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat, or you can feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any questions yet. Give it a couple of more seconds just in case you're typing away. Jody, do you see any questions? Oh, Marion, good question. You see that there's no speaking and listening requirement there. Yeah, because with HiSET, they don't ever test speaking and listening in HiSET, just like with GED. So there's no way to pass out of the speaking and listening section with the HiSET test, just like with the GED test. So that is parallel between GED and HiSET. Okay. Not seeing any additional questions, so let's go on to math. With math, we again have if the math score is 8 and if the math score is 9. If the math score is 8, it would be then there would just be one additional piece of demonstrated competency in one area: number sense, algebra, geometry, or data statistics and probability. So not in each area, but in one area. That would be if the person scores an 8 on the HiSET math. If the person scores 9 on HiSET math, there would be no additional work needed. Just that score of 9 or higher is sufficient to pass to complete all areas of math for the standard adult diploma. This is very similar, parallel to what we do with the current GED scores. Any questions about the math proposal? The math portion of the proposal. Okay. Thank you, Heather. I just want to go through it slowly because I do hope that it's fairly clear of how this will be embedded in this and how we're proposing this gets added to the completion options. So thanks. So Megan, you have a question. Could the student choose which area they do that extra work in? So if the student gets a score of 8 in math on the HiSET math, and that you need to do one additional area of competency mastery or demonstrate competency mastery, yeah, the student could choose the area that they do the extra work in. Ideally, again, this would be work that was done before they took HiSET math, so you could actually even have something ready that they could do, or you could develop something later that they could do. But between you and the student, you can pick which area that is. Great question. Any other questions? Okay, no worries. We'll have time for questions later on. So let's go into science. Now it gets a little dicey, or I shouldn't say dicey, but it gets there's a little bit of a choice here now for you as a group. We have 2 options for you for science and for social studies. So option 1 is basically 8 is great. Option 2 is 8 or 9. So I think I just want to explain a little bit of why we have 2 options here. With option 1 parallels what we did with the GED 2002 series, where we set a slightly higher standard for English language arts and math, and then had we didn't have the same high standard for science and social studies. So that's what option 1 looks like. It just says that if you have a score of 8 or higher in that science test, then you pass everything. Option 2 tries to weight all subjects or all domains equally or relatively equally. And so it tries to say, just like with math, it says, well, if you have a score of 8, you just need one additional demonstrated competency mastery in one of the science areas: nature of science and engineering, life science, physical science, or earth and space science. Just one additional demonstrated competency in the portfolio. And then option 2 with option 2, if they get a score of 9 or higher, there is no additional competency mastery demonstration needed. So option 2 would make all subjects parallel. Option 1 would be to kind of use a parallel structure like we used with the 2002 series GED. So that's a little bit of the difference between option 1 and option 2. Are there questions about the science portion of this proposal? Paula, your question. If this is adopted, will other competencies be adjusted to meet the same requirements? I'm not sure what you mean, Paula. Could you explain a little further?
Okay, hopefully I'm hearable.
Yep.
So if currently the GED 2002 does not have this requirement in it to do an example of work or sample of work from one of the areas of science. It's just flat out score accepted. Right?
Yep.
If we adapt option 2, then that changes the requirement on something we've been consistent with with other subjects. So does that mean we're going to go back and change the GED 2002 requirement to match this?
Good question. And I would say that each test is slightly different. So I think that the leadership, the adult diploma leadership team could take a look at this. If we as a if we as a system or as a standard adult diploma system decide to adopt option 2, that could be an invitation, or the state adult education leadership team, that leadership team could say, hey, we should maybe revisit that completion option for 2002 GED, series GED, but they would not have to do that. That would be an option, but not a requirement, because each test is treated just a little bit differently already within the competency completion options document. So it's a possibility, but not a requirement. So you can see there's like some difference in debate in the chat. Like some are thinking like, oh, let's just do like what we did with the 2002 series GED, and others to say, well, actually, maybe it would be more equitable if we chose option 2. That way all subjects would be parallel. So I think that's some good, you can kind of see the crux of the debate here.
Brad?
Yeah, Lee.
I'm on the road, so I can't type. I think another consideration is that we have Pearson VUE and HiSET competing against one, in terms of bidding. So I think it's important to make sure that if they're bidding against one another and we're looking at those bids, that we end up we're comparing apples and apples and oranges and oranges. So they should be as close to being equivalent as possible.
Yep, that makes sense across GED and HiSET, that we want to be as close to those two as possible with the current tests. But just the tests are structured a little differently too. GED, if you pass that subject, if you get the 145, the minimum subject score, and you get all 145s, you will earn your high school equivalency diploma. With HiSET, if you earn all 8s, you will not earn a high school equivalency diploma. You will have met the minimum standard for each subject, but you will not have met the full total test score needed of 45. So that's why there's just differences in how the two tests decided to structure themselves, or those two companies decided to structure their tests. Yeah. So like what you're saying, Brandy, is so potentially we could think of the 9 being similar to a score of 145. That's one way to look at it. Yep. And then Susan, you're saying that as you've looked at some of the HiSET practice tests, that it just doesn't seem that each subject is equally balanced in terms of difficulty. Excellent and interesting input. I'm glad you've been looking into that. Other initial thoughts for science? No worries, we will have some time for each of you to talk a little bit more and dive into this a little deeper. Let's go on to the social studies. With social studies, there are 2 options exactly like we're proposing in science. Option 1 is 8 or high, anything 8 or higher is good, no additional work needed. Option 2 is to be parallel with math and reading, to say that if you have a score of 8, you need demonstrated competency mastery in one of the areas in that subject. And then if you had a score of 9 or higher, then you would not need additional work. So if you have a score of 8, there would just be one additional piece of demonstrated competency mastery needed. And score 9 higher would be no additional work needed if we went with option 2. Option 1 would say no additional work needed if the score is 8 or higher. And then, so some additional ideas are, so Paul is putting out there potentially an option 3, which would be just saying that option for science and social studies, 9 or higher, or maybe in all subjects, 9 or higher is needed, but there's no option with an 8. So Paul is kind of creating some new options. And then Paula, could you describe a little bit more what, like, so you're saying that demonstrated competency mastery could be from a high school transcript, or you're asking if that could be the case. Could you give me an example of what you're thinking about there?
Okay, so some students come in and they may have passed life science, for example, but they've not passed the other sciences. So we can't say they've really completed their science competency, but they take the high set to complete it. They get an 8. So I need to show mastery of one high school competency. Why can't could I use the high school transcript biology course, life science course, to show it instead of having them do classwork?
Interesting concept. So typically demonstrated competency mastery is that there's some student work in that area. It's, because one way that, but it's something that could be considered, because like if you have an 8th grade earth, like if we go back to this science aspect, if you have your 8th grade earth and science class or a credit there, or like one half of a credit there, and then you got an 8 on the science test, should that get you, or should that count as mastery of all of the science areas? And I don't know. I think that's kind of, I'm not sure how I feel about that. It's an interesting area. It's an interesting proposal. In the past, and Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, anytime we've said, had something on the transcript that said, and demonstrated competency mastery in at least one area, frequently where that exists on the competency completion options document, that does mean a piece. It's intended to mean a piece of student work.
Right. I guess I have interpreted the word demonstrated to mean that I want to see a piece of student produced evidence. In other words, a piece of student work, not a high school transcript. I think that's a real interesting question, Paula. But I do think that would be a different interpretation than how we have used this phrase demonstrated competency mastery in the document.
Yeah. Thanks, Jody. I appreciate your additional insights. Okay. Definitely some good things to think about. No worries. We are going to give you some time to chat, but before we do that, are there any other clarifying questions first about social studies, or clarifying questions about science, math, or English language arts in the proposal before we go into groups, or before we set up our groups? Denise is asking, just want to clarify, the earth and space science from 8th grade can count on the transcript. If the high school does count that as their earth and space science requirement, then yes, that has been allowed on the transcript. Correct, Jody?
Yep, that is correct. And we definitely understand that that is happening. So students who are relatively young, that seems to be a common thing, but it's certainly not true, for every student. So you need to verify it with the district. And yes, I would say what we've said is, you're not going to get a middle school transcript and put it in the adult diploma portfolio, but what that evidence should look like would be that you have verified with the high school that they are accepting a middle school course that the student did for high school as part of their high school graduation requirements, because that's really how that works. But I think once again, we're kind of getting off topic, and I'll shift us back to talking about the high set. But we will have time for Q&A at the end of our time here. So we can revisit that if we need to.
Okay. Let's go into our breakout, or let's set up our breakouts about the high set. So in thinking about a proposal of high set as a completion option, we're going to have you set up some small groups. In the chat, you will see Astrid's going to be adding a link again to that proposal document, and a link to our notes. We have notes documents set up for each of your small groups. In your small groups, we're going to give you 20 minutes to quickly do introductions, name, pronouns, consortium, and role. Then also just quickly review that proposal again. Does everyone in the group understand the proposal to add HiSET as a completion option? Are there any questions about the proposal? And give you a chance to document those. Then you can discuss, what do you think? Do you think HiSET testing will be an option in your program or area? Which students do you think will want to use HiSET as a completion option versus other types of completion options? Those first two questions are just to give a little bit of scope for you. Think about which students you might be working with that might be utilizing this as an option, because we want to put students first. And then considering that, what do you think about this proposal? What do you like? What do you not like? And then in terms of the science and social studies options, which option do you prefer and why? If you get to that point, then in your small group, then you can take a preliminary group vote for science and social studies and document that in the notes, option 1 or option 2. So we're going to give you at least 20 minutes to talk. Astrid has added the breakout notes document. Please look for your breakout room number as you break out into your group. Are we all back? Excellent. Okay, well, welcome back. I hope you had a great conversation. I know maybe for some of you, you wish you would have had more time. Others, like I saw some of you already did get a vote. So yeah, we had a good array of conversations going on. So I was going to open it up for questions first. I see we have Tracy Chase with your hand up. Tracy.
Okay, so we needed some clarification. So right now, if a person took the GED 2002 and received that minimum score of 410, they would be good to go on that particular, for science or social, right?
Correct.
Okay, but what we are looking at is, so then option 1 on both of those would be like what it is with GED presently for the 2002 version.
For the old GED, the 2002
Correct.
series, correct. Yep.
But option 2, if we went with option 2, would we also then change the GED 2002 completion? Would we require more for that?
Good question. And so like not necessarily, it's a possibility if the adult diploma leadership team did want to make that change, and if the working group really thought strongly that the 2002 series GED completion options should be changed, then that could go forward. But it would really kind of be dependent on the adult diploma leadership team and the working group to really kind of provide feedback, and the leadership team and MDE to make a decision to determine whether or not to make changes to others, like the GED 2002 series completion options. For today, we're really primarily looking at HiSET as a completion option. Like, what do we initially want for HiSET to be a completion option? And I see, Tracy, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Andy.
Okay, if I can get the mute to actually unclick. I think part of the thing that we have to keep two views on here is, are we trying to be consistent with the way that we wrote GED 2002 a few years ago? Or are we trying to be consistent within the test of HiSET? Because we had kind of an inconsistency that we require more on math and less on the science and social studies. So, it's just, do you want to be consistent one way or the other? But
Yep.
your secondary thing is, we really don't need to spend tremendous amounts of time talking about GED 2002. Out of our 1,000+ things that Jody was talking about, it's less than 1% of all of those diploma portfolios have GED 2002 as a completion option. It's not one of our major ones. We could change it, we could leave it, and it's going to affect so few people as to really not be a big deal anymore. But the very few people that it would affect would be a big deal for them.
Right. Right. Yep, that makes sense. Other questions or initial questions to share?
Brad?
Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, I was in the breakout room. I kept coming and going. I'm in better reception right now. But in the email we received where we got this data or the proposal, it had one section where it said the 2002 data, It said, but or however, the high set has been updated. Updated to what? Does anyone recall that sentence?
I'm not sure which sentence you're talking about, Lee, but the high set.
We received an email from the department with the information that we're going over right now as to the options.
Yeah.
As a part of that email, there was a section. And one section was a basic sentence that said about the comparison of 2002 and high set. That said, however, but the high set has been updated, and I took it to mean updated to meet CCRS standards. Does anybody remember that sentence? For some reason, that really stuck with me because it just seemed like it meant a lot, but was not explained very much.
Yeah, so according to the competition, when we did the competition for the high school equivalency assessments, HiSET did say that they are aligned to CCRS in many ways, and in each of and to current high school standards in all subject areas. And they demonstrated that, and the reviewers felt that they did in many of the areas. Now, Christine can share with you about how in the writing that slightly deviates from the standards, but that within the CCRS. But that, yes, the HiSET is supposed to be based on current high school standards, national high school standards, whereas the GED 2002 was based off of much older high school standards from about 2 decades ago.
And therein lies my assumption then, or my assertion, that we should not be comparing it to 2002 GED.
See, that's a fair point.
Okay, I'm going to unmute again because I got cards around me.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah.
So it feels like people are diving into what do you like about the proposal and what do you not like. So let's just give you some additional opportunities to share. What do you like about the proposal? What does your group not like about the proposal? I see in the chat, Megan was saying in our group, they talked about the rigor of the test versus the scoring of the test. The HiSET would match the rigor of the current GED. Yeah, so the rigor and the standards match the current GED, but the scoring model matches the old GED. So it's really just the scoring model, but not the current rigor of the test necessarily. Absolutely. And Christine, you're saying it's interesting because so far the rigor of the HiSET is more comparable. So what you're saying, Christine, is that the rigor is actually more comparable to GED 2002 than to GED 2014. So you don't think that there's an updated rigor or it's not updated to current standards from your perspective. The rigor is different. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk for a second. The rigor is different. There's definitely more CCRS alignment on the HiSET than there is with the GED 2014 or 2002. But from what I'm seeing as far as like the overall requirement for prior knowledge, especially in social studies and science, that's more like the 2002 before the 2014 turned into more of a reading skills test. And also with the writing, at least the language portion, the questions seem to reflect the 2002 test more than the 2014. So I can speak nothing to math, nothing at all. So, oh, but Andy says Andy and I agree on something. That's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, the math, I don't see the HiSET as strong as a connection into the CCRS as the current GED 2014 is. I wouldn't go back and like, how did this compare to GED 2002? But yeah, I would think that, you know, if you're saying like, is this like super rigorous? At least the sample tests that I've taken have not been, but they put a lot of emphasis in certain places and not as much emphasis in other places. And that's kind of a bothersome thing.
Interesting. So we have a wide variety of perspectives here. Chrissy, it's a pretty deep dive for a Monday. Oh, I can't imagine having this deep of a dive on a Friday afternoon either. Oh, other perspectives from your groups about what you liked or didn't like about the proposal. Okay. Not seeing anything else. Just kind of share, like if any group wants to share out, did your group get to vote? And if so, how did you vote? Was it unanimous for one of the options? Was it kind of majority in one option? How did your votes go? I'd like to hear that from folks. If your group got to vote, can you share? So Susan's saying when their group, they had an 8, a 9, and an 8.5. I'm not sure what that means, Susan. I have to apologize. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. .5 on both sides. Okay. Andy says that their group was not unanimous, but had a higher vote for option 2. Okay. Sherry is saying that as a one-room schoolhouse, if option 2 is adapted, I think I would end up encouraging students to take the GED rather than HiSET, since no additional work would need to be done after the minimum passing score. It's just a staffing issue, and cutting off additional work is beneficial. Other groups, Megan said that their group liked option 2 the most. Heather said that most of the group chose option 1 for simplicity. Okay. Excellent. So you can see we're all over the place here, and in true working group style, we have a variety of perspectives in the room, and it's really helpful that we're looking at multiple sides of this issue, and that we are weighing a lot of different factors here. So I really like the thought that you're putting into this, both like what seems to be equitable for subjects, what seems to be how do the GED current and the old GED compare to the HiSET? What do you think in terms of the standards alignment with the rigor? You have a lot of good perspectives here, and we can make some of these decisions now that you've taken some of these HiSET practice tests, and you have a lot more information about HiSET than you did last time we got together. So I think that's really helpful. Denise is sharing that they thought option 2 was good because it gave options to the students. So that is really helpful. Excellent. So Jody, do you want to tell us a little bit about next steps?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And thanks for leading us through that discussion. I think you're absolutely right. It was a very typical working group, no easy answers. So here's what the plan is for our next steps. So based on feedback, the leadership team is going to decide how HiSET will be embedded as a completion option. I think we were a little bit hopeful that the feedback would be very clear today, and I think that's not the case. I think, what you all are pointing out and really emphasizing is there are a lot of factors and a lot of advantages and disadvantages and a lot of reasons, why option 1 and each option 1 and option 2 have their benefits. So I think what I am leaning towards here in terms of the next step is that we will try to solicit a little bit more feedback, maybe from folks who weren't in the room today, or maybe you all, when you take a step away and have some more time to think about it, might become a little more clear on where exactly you fall in terms of your opinion. So look for some follow-up communication via email over the next month or two to get a little bit more feedback. But ultimately, the leadership team will make a decision that probably somebody will like and somebody else will not like, because that's how it goes. Once a decision has been made, then the competency completion options document will be edited, and then the new version of that document will be distributed out to the working group. We'll post it on the Atlas website in our resource library, and just, you know, make sure that everybody knows there's an updated version of that document. And we will plan to discuss what the updates are and exactly where this conversation landed at our upcoming working group meeting in January. So just be watching for those as next steps. And yeah, thank you to everybody for weighing in and for sharing your thoughts. And yeah, just for being willing to acknowledge all of the messiness of all of this. So appreciate that. At this point, that is all the content we have for you today. Yep. So we're almost to the end of our time here. Oh, I will just point out to everybody a reminder, make sure that you have these 2 dates on your calendar for our upcoming working group in January, and then hopefully an in-person meeting in April. And at this point, we do have a few more minutes. If anyone wants to talk more about the HiSET, perhaps, or if there are any other questions, anything else adult diploma related that you wanted to ask about, anybody have any exciting program news you want to share? This is the time for that. I think Denise, you had a question that we could circle back to at this point, if you want to stick that in the chat, or if you want to unmute and just say your question, that would be okay too. Or anybody else, go ahead. Okay, Denise, oops, let's see. So question in the chat, in a previous meeting, I think, sorry, my chat keeps scrolling away from me. I think we were told that only Microsoft Word counts for digital literacy word processing, but there is no mention of that in the language. I assume, Denise, that your question is about the North Star assessments for the digital literacy area. And I forget, where is my, here, I'm gonna flip to that portion of the competency completion options document to make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Yeah, so Microsoft Word, yes, Microsoft Word is one of the 5 required assessments in North Star. So I guess I'm not sure, given that, I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
So I unmuted.
Yeah, great.
So maybe I'm just looking at the wrong thing, but I'm looking at the standard adult high school diploma competencies sheet.
Okay.
And at the end, it says, you know, it does all the areas, and it says area digital literacy, 5 competencies.
Mm-hmm.
And number 4 says demonstrate effective use of word processing.
Yep.
So my question is, can they use Google Docs, because that's word processing as well?
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I see. I understand your question. So I'm looking at the competency completion options document. So that's the one that's like 25 pages long and lays out what are the different types of evidence that we want to see to show that students have mastered the competency. So if on that document, when you look at the employability and career awareness section, which is page 23 or page 24, depending on what version of this document you're looking at, under North Star digital literacy assessments as the completion option for that digital literacy area, it lists the 5 specific North Star assessments that we are looking for. And one that it lists there is Microsoft Word. So as long as that document says that that is the assessment that we are looking for. Now, could that change in some point in the future? Could we as a working group decide to update this document? Because I wonder, is the reason you're asking that question is because now North Star has a Google Docs assessment? Is that correct?
Yeah, it has a Google Docs assessment, and it's mostly what our students use because they're in Google Classroom and they're all familiar with Google. So the younger they are, the more they're using Google Docs.
I would,
understood.
I
That
would-
is definitely a change we could suggest and we could vote on and we could discuss as a working group, but that is the process for that. It has to be a change, you know, that sort of goes through the process. And as of right now, the competency completion options document does say Microsoft Word. So that is what we're looking for. Andy?
Yeah, my bet is that that's very similar to our legislation that said it has to be GED. And then all of a sudden HiSET and TASK came around. We had to go to the legislature and get it voted to allow us to use the other tests. So at the time we wrote this, North Star, all they had was
Yes.
Microsoft Word. They didn't have
Correct.
the other one.
That
So
is
we
correct.
should have probably put into their, you know, a word processing
We should have maybe.
option, but at the time, the only word processing option we had was Microsoft Word.
Yep, correct. Exactly. This document, this version of this document probably predates that Google Docs assessment. So can we add it? Yes, potentially, but not, it's, yeah, currently not there. Is definitely something we could consider in the future. Yeah.
If anybody else has any other questions, please ask them, but I have a personal thing I'd like to share that does not relate to our work here.
Okay. Congrats, Megan, first student almost done with a portfolio. Yay, that's exciting. Yeah, I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Go
So
ahead,
those
Andy.
of you that have been a part of this for a long time, or maybe even not a part of it for a long time, you may know one of our teachers here at Adult Academic that has been very integral in this adult diploma, as Sarah Turnbull. She was one of our science people that really worked well to get the science standards and everything pulled together. Last week, her husband passed away. And so we're just wanting everybody to kind of keep her in thoughts and prayers as she's going through a difficult time in her life.
Thanks for sharing that, Andy. I hadn't heard that.
And she has shared it out. So it is okay for me to share that.
Yeah, Sarah has definitely been a big contributor in terms of science expertise.
Yep.
Which we don't have a lot of. So she's been really valuable. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Andy. Any other questions, announcements, celebrations, thoughts? Wendy, I think you could go ahead and stop the recording. I think we've got all of our